All right, today we're talking about multiplying and dividing, so getting a little more intense and still going to be rational numbers today. So first, what I want you to do is use patterns to complete each statement. So I'm going to give you a lot of problems and I want you to kind of work them through looking for a pattern. So 2 times 3, you should be able to do these before I write the answer down, is 6. We're going to keep going for a while. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 0 is 0. I want you to notice here that I'm starting out with 2 every time, and then the number that I'm multiplying it by, it keeps decreasing by 1 every time. My answer keeps decreasing by 2 every time. Okay, so next, if I keep that pattern 2 times negative 1 and my answer decreases by 2, I want you to think what it should be, and it should be negative 2. If I keep going, 2 times negative 2 should be negative 4, followed by 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. What I want you to notice here is something about the signs of your number. Just from the pattern we just observed, what seems to be the sign of the product of a positive number and a negative number? So if you multiply a positive number and a negative number, what kind of answer do you get? I hope you said a negative answer. So it might be worth noting to yourself that if you have a positive times a negative, you always get a negative answer. And that's fine with a negative times a positive too. We're going to get a negative answer. Okay, so we know that a positive times a negative is going to give us a negative answer here. If we start with that knowledge, 3 times negative 2, that's negative 6. 2 times negative 2, that's negative 4. 1 times negative 2, that's negative 2. So notice here, the negative 2 is staying constant. Here, this is going down by 1 every time. And this, my answer, seems to be going up by 2 every time. It keeps getting 2 bigger each time. Okay? We know that 0 times negative 2, I hope you know that that's 0. And so if this, my pattern continues, I'm starting with negative 1, so that's going down by 1. But this, my answer, should be going up by 2 each time, so this should be positive 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 should be positive 4, and negative 3 times negative 2 should be positive 6. So I want you to look at the signs here. What seems to be the sign of the product of 2 negative numbers? So if we have a negative times a negative, I want you to notice that your answer is a positive number. So this is worth knowing. Negative times a negative, that equals a positive. That works every time. Same with positive times a positive, that equals a positive, but I hope you know that one already. Okay. All right, let's work out some properties. The identity of property of multiplication, similar to the identity property of addition, where you get a number and you don't change it by doing something. Think to yourself, what can I multiply a number by without changing it? Hope you answered 1. Any number multiplied by 1 is itself. So you multiply a number by 1, you get whatever you started out with. Multiplication property of 0, now that just tells me when I multiply anything by 0, I get 0. And the multiplication property of negative 1, that just says if I take a number, I multiply by a negative 1, I get its opposite. So like negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5, because that's the opposite of negative 5. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Okay, so it gets its opposite when you multiply by negative 1. Okay, now let's actually work out some problems. I'm most concerned that you're looking for the correct sign, but I do want you to do the proper computation as well. So first problem, negative 3 times negative 11. These ones I want you to try them all on your own before I give away the answer. Okay, so negative 3 times negative 11. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 11 is 33, so this is positive 33. Negative 6 times 3/4. So here you should be thinking a negative times a positive, it's going to be a negative answer. I can write this with fraction form if I want. Negative 6 over 1 times 3/4. Remember when we multiply fractions, we go straight across, so it's negative 18 over 4. And we need to reduce that. Those are both divisible by 2, so I can say negative 9/2. I'll take negative 9/2, or I'll take negative 4 1/2. Either one of those is an okay answer. All right, so this time we're going to do the same concept, but we have 3 numbers that we're multiplying, and we have to put in negative 18, substitute it in for r, and substitute negative 5 for s. So we have 5 times negative 18 times negative 5. Okay, multiplying, I can multiply in any order. I'm just going to go from left to right. 5 times negative 18 is a positive times a negative. That's negative 90 times negative 5. And here I have a negative times a negative, so it's going to be a positive. It's going to be positive 450. Okay. All right, we're going to use order of operations here. This concept is probably the most important thing that's hard and different that you're going to learn in your notes. So triple star, say, I need to know this, I need to practice it. There is a difference between saying negative 2 in parentheses to the fourth and then just negative 2 to the fourth. And I want to talk about what that is. Okay. And it's hard for people, so I want you to keep this in mind. Negative 2, if it's in the parentheses, so the quantity negative 2 to the fourth power, that means probably what you think it means. I have this in parentheses, so I'm doing it first. I'm going to keep it together. Negative 2 is going to stay together the whole time. And that means I'm taking negative 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. Okay, so this means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. I can multiply in whatever order I want, so I might kind of group these as that's positive 4 times positive 4. I'm going to get an answer of positive 16 here when I take negative 2 and it's in parentheses and it's to the fourth power. When I look at the second problem, this means the opposite of 2 to the fourth. When the negative sign's not in parentheses, I'm only taking 2 to the fourth, and then I'm taking the opposite of that. So I'm doing 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and I want the opposite of that, or the negative of it. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, but I want the opposite of that. So this answer is negative 16. Okay, so that's going to be important to know, that if the number is not in parentheses, I just take the 2 to the fourth and then I take the opposite of it. For the first one, I'm actually taking negative 2 and multiplying it by itself 4 times. Okay. The inverse property of multiplication, it's similar to the inverse property of addition, where when you add a number and its opposite, you get 0. When you multiply a number by its multiplicative inverse, we get 1. So this is a property. For every non-zero number a, there is a multiplicative inverse, 1 over a, such that you do a times 1 over a, and you always get an answer of 1. So try to answer that before I give it to you. Think about it. That might be hard. What's another name for a multiplicative inverse? So what's another name for when you multiply a number by this other number and you get 1? That other number is called the reciprocal. Reciprocal. So when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, you get 1. So for example, let me do another number like 2/3. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. And 2/3 times 3/2, remember when you flip the numerator and denominator, multiply straight across, I get 6 over 6. I get 1. Any number times its reciprocal is always 1. So I want you to think about it. Why does 0 not have a multiplicative inverse? Feel free to tell me in class tomorrow. I wonder if you can come up with that. Okay, let's look at dividing. The great thing about dividing, I'm not even going to write it all out because the rules are exactly the same as for multiplication. In other words, a positive divided by a negative, that equals a negative. If you have a negative divided by a negative, that equals a positive. Positive. And same with like a negative divided by a positive. That equals a negative. And you obviously know positive divided by positive is a positive number. So the rules are the same. You don't have to memorize a new set of rules. So let's just look straight at some problems. Okay, so the first one, 70 divided by negative 5. So you might have to do a little division. If you don't know that, 5 goes into 7 once. And then do you remember this? You subtract, and that's 20. 5 goes into 24 times. So it's 14, but we need to think of our sign. It's a positive divided by a negative. That's going to be negative 14. Okay, negative 54 divided by negative 9. 54 divided by 9 should be a math fact you have memorized. And it's a negative divided by a negative, so it's a positive answer. We get 6. Okay, this one's tougher. I want you to evaluate this entire expression, the opposite of x over y, so x divided by y, minus 4z squared, and I'm giving you some variables, what they mean. X equals 4, y is negative 2, and z equals negative 4. So let's start this problem with our substitution. We're going to have the negative sign. Instead of x, we're going to put in 4 over y, and instead of y, I'm going to put negative 2 minus 4 times z squared. And every time you substitute something in, you're substituting it in parentheses. I didn't do it here, but I could have. But I just want you to know, since this is an exponent, you're thinking of the whole number as a negative 4 together and in parentheses. Okay, so I'm solving this problem. I'm going to follow my order of operations. I don't have anything really in parentheses to solve. Those are all solved as numbers in there, so I'm going to move on to my exponents. So I'm going to do negative 4 squared, which is positive 16. And then I have the opposite of 4 over negative 2 minus 4 times 16. Okay? And now I need to solve this. So I'm going to multiply and divide left to right, so I'm going to do my dividing first. The opposite of 4 over negative 2. Well, 4 over negative 2 is negative 2. So the opposite of that, or the negative negative 2, is positive 2 minus 4 times 16 is 64. So I have 2 minus 64, and I'm getting negative 62. That should be my final answer. Okay. All right, let's go over this. This is usually a toughie for people. Evaluate P over R, that means P divided by R, for P equals 3/2 and R equals negative 3/4. So I'm going to start out by substituting here. I'm going to do 3/2. This means over negative 3/4. Okay, so remember that fraction bar means divide. That can really help you out on this type of problem. So really this problem is asking what's 3/2 divided by negative 3/4. Okay, so it's a fraction problem. You're working on these and your that quizzes this week. But what I want you to do is 3/2, and remember dividing by a fraction is like multiplying by its reciprocal. So 3/2 times 4 over negative 3. Okay, again, you can cross cancel out first, or you can multiply straight across. I'll show you multiplying straight across for today. So 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And then 12 divided by negative 6, that is negative 2. So my answer is negative 2. Okay, so a reminder that try your homework without a calculator again. That's like tomorrow in class, your mastery. I don't want you using a calculator on that, so don't panic that you have extra homework after this that's not your old mastery. But tomorrow, I want you no calculator. We're going to practice that. All right, so multiplying and dividing, this is something I just want you to keep doing and keep doing until you're really fluent and good at it.